Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm Noreen Cassidy, Director of College Counseling. I'm joined by one of my colleagues, Lauren Laskey, who's over here, as well as two senior parents, Kelly Ewing and Angie Brown, who have successfully survived the college process for not 2, but rather 5 students in the class of 2024. Kelly is the parent of triplets, Abigail, Bridget, and Colleen, while Angie is the parent of twins, Samantha and Zachary. So if at some point in the next 2 years you're feeling overwhelmed by this process, just think of them. Lauren will provide you with some information about her background in a few minutes. As for me, I'm in my 21st year at Morristown Baird after a long career in college admission, the majority of which was at NYU and Fordham. I also spent 2 years as the Dean of Admission at a New England boarding school for students with learning differences. The purpose of tonight is not to say that students at this point should be thinking about where they want to go to college, but rather to emphasize the importance of making the most of their MBS careers. They should be focusing on their schoolwork, the rigor of their curriculum, grades, and extracurricular activities. Lauren will be going into more detail about how they should be doing that. However, suffice it to say that ultimately the process will emerge from a combination of all of these things and an honest self-assessment of who they are and what they are looking for in a college. Having said that, however, we think it's important for you to have a sense of what to expect from the college process and how our office works with individual families beginning in the junior year. So I will be providing you with an overview of what we do in support of every student. We will then hear some insights from Angie and Kelly and end with any questions that you might have. So with that, I will turn it over to Lauren.
All right, good evening, everyone. I just saw the sign that says, please do not touch the microphone. I've already broken the first rule. Sorry about that. Thank you again so much for coming out. We know we are rapidly approaching spring break, and we were just talking about how busy of a week it is, so thank you for making time to be here with us this evening. As Noreen mentioned, my name is Lauren Laskey. I am an Associate Director of College Counseling. I am currently wrapping up my 7th year here at MBS. Before that, I worked in college admissions for a number of years at Kenyon College, a small liberal arts college in Ohio. And before that, I did a 2-year AmeriCorps program working in an underfunded rural high school in Virginia, helping students through the college process there. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about tonight was just, the sense of what are colleges going to be looking for when they review your students' applications in 2 to 3 years, depending on where you are. This lovely graphic that actually a colleague of ours put together shows the many, many things that go into the application review. So I do want to touch on some of the things colleges will look at, but then hopefully also turn it into appropriate action items advice that you can pass along to your students. One thing I find both sometimes challenging but also very exciting about the college process here in the U.S. is that colleges will consider lots of different factors in their evaluation of each student. There's never going to be one most important thing, one deciding factor, and then every college that exists is going to place a different amount of emphasis on each of those factors. But essentially, the college will be trying to answer 2 questions on behalf of your students. Is this student a good academic fit for us? And is the student a good social fit? I do want to talk about both of those, but just to jump right in with academics, the colleges are really going to try to determine if a student has challenged themselves appropriately within the context of their high school. The second half of that question or sentence is so important just because every high school, whether they're down the road from us or across the globe, is going to have completely different offerings, different grading scales, different opportunities, and it just wouldn't be fair to hold MBS standards to those of, again, a school or one of our peer schools. College reps, when they're working through reviewing files, they do take the time to learn about what's available at every school, that they have students applying from. And again, and then beyond that, it's very individualized. So for some of your students, it may mean that challenging themselves may mean taking a number of advanced placement, advanced studies, so the full year college level courses, advanced topics courses, which are interdisciplinary 1-semester college courses, honors coursework. And then for others, it might mean challenging themselves and doing as well as they can in a standard college preparatory curriculum. For others in the room, it might mean taking advantage of the ICP program, maybe pursuing an independent study sometime throughout their 4 years, or for certain majors or for certain students, taking a variety of classes in the arts or in the CID. So my advice for sophomores and freshmen is to really take advantage of what's here at MBS. Know that colleges will see all 4 years of classes a student has taken. They will see 4 years of grades, and they do truly consider grade trends, whether those are going up or going down. They will also note if there are blips on the radar, a student, maybe pushed themselves outside of their comfort zone and had a slightly lower grade. That is something that we will be able to provide context to in the application. And I will say, when students do challenge themselves and take something maybe a little different, a little unexpected, sometimes it helps them figure out what they want their major to be, which for you all could be very helpful when you're narrowing down the list later on and figuring out where to get started. The other piece of advice I would have for younger students is to really work on building and maintaining good relationships with their teachers. Now, ultimately, when they apply to college, those recommendations will come from their junior year teachers, but I think it's excellent practice both for at the college level, seeking out office hours and seeking out their professors, and just to, again, get in the habit of getting to know their teachers. I think it's a good thing to start now and really, like I said, building those relationships as early as possible. And then I did want to touch on one of the many things on this slide is standardized testing. For those of you who are parents or guardians of sophomores, now many of them took the pre-ACT just a couple weekends ago, as well as the PSAT in the fall, so just practice versions of the 2 standardized tests that exist. Those are an excellent opportunity for students to just take low stakes, it doesn't count for anything, testing just to see if one test type might be better for them. And again, just get some practice with getting up very early and sitting for a 3 to 4 hour exam. And then for those sophomores, there will be one more opportunity in the fall to take the practice or the PSAT again. And then for those of you who are parents and guardians of freshmen, just rewind it a year so they will have an opportunity to take 2 practice tests with us next year and then another one in junior year. Now, despite the fact that a couple of high-profile colleges recently have announced that they are going back to requiring testing, the vast majority of colleges and universities throughout the country remain test optional. But if students are good test takers or they just want to keep their options open, having a test score on file, it can be a helpful data point. So just something to be mindful of as they move into junior year, especially. And just to give you a sense of the opportunities that they will have, I wanted to highlight the practice tests that happen in sophomore year and junior year, and then usually once they get into junior and senior year, that's when they're sitting for the tests officially, as well as AP exams if they're doing those as well. All right, so to move on a little bit to the social fit and how colleges determine that, we actually had been using this slide in a program a couple years ago, and we really enjoyed it, because I think this is kind of the stereotype of the student applying to college, right? They're trying to do a little bit of everything, and sometimes it feels a little forced, as it does with this student. But essentially, what colleges are trying to figure out is how is the student spending their time when they're not in class. It's going to look very different for every student that's out there. When colleges are making decisions, they're looking for students who are going to not just take classes and graduate and move on in 4 years, but are really going to be involved in the community. So that's something they look for. It can be kind of overwhelming when you start looking at the students that are profiled on a college website, right? It seems like everyone out there is a trilingual Olympic athlete who has worked in the same research lab for 6 summers, and they're all incredible, but at the same, please don't use that as the bar that you're aiming for. But again, they know that students in our area do have access to opportunities, and they want to make sure they've taken advantage of that over their time or throughout their time in high school. Another thing maybe for students to focus on would be leadership opportunities, and I say that not just in terms of title, right? Students should not be focusing on just being the president of this and the captain of that, but really trying to find some ways to really have better involvement and to find things that they're genuinely interested in. So I would say some advice for freshmen and sophomores, as much as possible, continue to go to club meetings, figure out what they like, what they want to do, and then look for that leadership and involvement. So that might mean working with a club advisor or a club leader, maybe an older student, to bring in a guest speaker or plan a trip or do something here on campus. I've been so impressed with what our students have been doing, especially as we're now coming out of COVID and there are many more opportunities for students to get involved. So that would be something, for them to think about. Community service is also an important part of the review. Now, everyone at MBS has to complete, all students at MBS have to complete 16 hours of service every single year. But it's also important for them to be finding a way to do some sort of meaningful work. So some questions they could be thinking about when they do take part in service are what am I involved with and how can I make it better? Is there something I genuinely care about? Perhaps if there's an event coming up, can I advertise it to my friends, to my classmates in my hometown? When it comes time to actually apply, there will be plenty of opportunities for them to not only, again, list their actual official title, but to talk about the ways in which they made the things they do that much better. So they want to be keeping track of that, what their actual results were from the work that they put in. One thing that may be top of mind right now, I referenced, spring break coming up, is how students are going to be spending their summers. In our office, we talk often about the value of a summer job. I think students learn a lot from that about themselves, about the real world. I think that's really valuable. Internships are something for students to look at. Anecdotally, it does seem like those are fewer and farther between for high school students, unfortunately. But if you know of anything, or there's something an opportunity for your student that could be really valuable, even if it's just shadowing someone for a few days to see if there's a potential career they might like. Again, service opportunities, there's a lot that they may have more time for in the summer, so that could be something to consider. Many of you, especially those who are parents or guardians of sophomores, are probably being inundated with ads for various summer programs. So if you are, again, there are plenty out there that are great. I've had students who have done those and had amazing experiences, but many of them do come with a hefty price tag, and colleges are very aware of that. So I would caution you against doing a program just because it's associated with a particular university or because you think students think it looks good. That really, there's a lot of ways for them to have academic experience that don't cost whatever the price of them is right now. And at the same time, we hope that your students are working hard throughout the year, so they do not need to spend every waking hour between early June and the end of August in class and trying to get ahead. We want them to take a breather over the summer, relax, and then hopefully come back to the start of the year recharged. So those are all ways in which we hope that students will be able to prepare themselves well for college or for actually applying and figuring out who they are. But at the same time, they're going to want to at some point figure out what colleges are the right fit for them. So eventually, as they move into junior year, they will be doing more targeted, specific college visits for, once we have many more, a fuller sense of their academic profile, what colleges might be a good fit for them then. But at the same time, if you have students who are ready to and want to start looking at places, I don't think it's a bad idea. Whether you're, if you're traveling for over the break or, spring or summer, or you're going to be visiting family, or, even just right around us, there are an incredible number of colleges that you can see without having to drive more than an hour or two. And this might be a good time for your students to determine, do I want a small school or a big school? Let me check out a city campus and one maybe more rural, just to help them get a sense of where they're going to be best suited. Again, it doesn't so much matter what the college is, but just seeing a variety more casually when they feel like they're ready. That would be my last piece of advice for that. So again, we are very early in the process. I'm again glad to have all of you here tonight. These are just a few ideas, pieces of advice to get started. But when you get further in the process, you'll be working very closely with our office. So I'm going to turn it over to Noreen Cassidy again to talk a little bit more about what that will look like.
I actually meant to do this at the beginning, but just show of hands, how many of you are parents of 9th graders? Okay, good number. And 10th? And how many have been through the process before? Okay, good. We have a 4-year calendar, and this is actually on the College Counseling website through your parent portal. The first 2 years, the bullet points really speak to all of the things that Lauren mentioned in terms of students' engagement, both in and out of the classroom. The to-dos at the bottom refer specifically to the college process. So as you can see, there really are no to-dos for you parents of 9th graders. So you're not behind on anything in terms of this process. For 10th graders, as Lauren mentioned, they had the opportunity to take the PSAT and the ACT. And then they also have the opportunity to attend our annual case studies program. And we've started to advertise that it's about a week and a half after we return from spring break. It's a program whereby we have college representatives come in and actually facilitate mock admission committees. So they're reviewing fictitious candidates to a fictitious college. We actually divide up the students and the parents into different groups. And I think particularly for 10th graders, it's a really fun exercise without the pressure of actually being in the college process, but at the same time, they might be able to reflect a little bit on, what they're doing, how they're challenging themselves, how they're engaging outside of the classroom, and how that ultimately winds up on a college application. So that's just a plug for our case studies program on April 11th. When we get into 11th and 12th grade, that's when the college counseling program really does begin in earnest. We kick off the program with junior college night in November. And just prior to that, students are assigned to one of the 4 college counselors in our office. Because there are 4 of us, we have the benefit of working with anywhere between 25 and 35 students, depending on the size of the class, and therefore being able to provide a really individualized process. We begin individual meetings with juniors in January. We work really hard to get to know your students, to develop our working relationship. And one of the first tasks that we have is to engage in some self-reflection in regard to the characteristics that they think they're going to be looking for, so that together we can start to build a list of prospective colleges with many families starting to do college visits over spring break. After our first student meeting has taken place, we schedule our first family meeting. And then once those have taken place, it's really a constant back and forth with every family. So very often, when we have these initial parent meetings, parent will say, well, when's the next time that we see you? And the answer always is whenever, when you feel the need. There's going to be certain points in the process where we have meetings, we have, both class meetings, group meetings, individual meetings, but we are very much available for every family on an ongoing basis throughout this process. We're also involved in course selection for the rising seniors, so many of the meetings that we've been having over the last week and a half or so revolve around that. And then as the semester winds down, we work with them, as Lauren said, to identify teachers who will write academic letters of recommendation for them. We also host a series of application and essay workshops right after school ends. And it's also important to note that we're a 12-month office. So aside from vacation time, we're very much available during the summer to, hear about how the college list is shaping up and also review essay drafts and applications. The fall semester of senior year is our busiest time. I had a parent one time say to me, you're like an accountant during tax season, and that really is what it feels like at sometimes. So we're finalizing the college list, making sure that it has the right balance of reach, target, and likely schools. We're helping them to finalize their applications, their essays. I should also point out that the English department is exceptionally supportive to us during that process in terms of reviewing essays for students. And then we also host about 75 colleges every fall who come and meet with our seniors. So again, as they are finalizing their lists, they have additional questions, or they want to meet the person who will most likely be reading their application. A lot of those colleges will be here between September and Thanksgiving. Most of our students apply through an early application process, either early action or early decision. So we are processing literally hundreds of applications in November. And while most of our students have at least one acceptance under their belt in January, many are still waiting on their final decisions, which are actually coming out over the course of the next 2 weeks or so. When we return from break, we'll be, circling back to the seniors for updates and talking through their final decisions, reviewing financial aid packages with them, all in time for their May 1st deposit deadline. So that was really college counseling in a very, very quick nutshell. There's a lot of detail behind that, but we did want to give you a sense of what we do. Finally, we thought it would be helpful to have a sense of where our students go by providing some numbers from last year's class. We are always looking to broaden students' awareness of the many options that exist, and that's definitely reflected in the wide range of schools that they attend. Last year, 105 students in the class of 2023 are now at 69 different colleges. Moreover, they were among our most geographically diverse, with 25 states and Canada represented on the matriculation list, and the largest numbers going to Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and New York. On average, our students apply to 7 or 8 schools, and in recent years, anywhere from a third to a half commit through binding early decision programs. As I mentioned, the class of 2024 is in the final stages of their process, with any remaining decision expected in the next few weeks. That said, while there continues to be significant shifts in the applicant pools in both size and quality, particularly at the most selective places, we've been very pleased with their results. Okay. And so with that, I'd like to invite Kelly, Angie, and Lauren up to the stage for some of their insights. You've already met Lauren, but Kelly and Angie, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Angie Brown, hello.
I'm Kelly Ewing. I have 3 seniors that just went through the college process. They did forget to say one thing about the college counseling. They are part college counselors, part psychologists in getting us through the program and being very supportive to the parents as well as the students.
So Lauren started out talking about students challenging themselves while maintaining balance, and that sounds easy in theory, but we know that it's not. Can you talk about how that played out with your own children?
I wrote some notes because I didn't want to forget. But one of the things I wanted to say is that we initially hired a private counselor, and we ended up hiring 2 private. We didn't need them. These guys have it covered. Everything that was most supportive for my kids came through Lauren specifically. So I think that was just a distraction for my family. Maintaining balance, I wanted to say that let your lives and the kids' loves lead the way, because I found that what was interesting for my kids was what was interesting about my kids, and that's what the schools sort of honed in on. My son took more like honors, and he had kind of a bigger life. He raced cars. So it was like an unusual thing, and I think that got him some notice. And my daughter took a few APs, but not all APs. And then she did a specific like certification program. And particularly wanted to emphasize both of them participated in the ICP, which I forget what it stands for, but I highly recommend it. They were in the ICP, the Arts and Innovation with Mr. Martino, and I wrote some quotes down that my kids said. It's like having a tailored news feed. My daughter said, in short, it's yes and. So wherever they wanted to go with that program, they had the support and the encouragement, and then a suggestion of what could be next. And then my daughter said the amount of resources that come out of ICP is incredible. So I would very much encourage that. You can also parlay some of the ICP concepts into an independent study, and I think colleges seem to like that a lot.
Do you want me to talk about balance, or you want to go to the next question?
If you'd like to add, or we can go on.
I think you covered a lot of
Okay.
it. Mine went a different route. They actually didn't do the ICP program because there are so many great courses that are offered at Morristown Beard. They didn't want to be, we were the first year of the ICP, so they were still figuring it out. So we weren't sure they were going to be stuck on a path, although it sounds like it was great. And so they took a lot of electives junior and senior year that they would otherwise not have the opportunity to do, that has led to some of their interests for college and stuff. So ICP is only one route that you can go, lots of different. As for balance, I found that the activities they did outside the classroom were just as important as inside. It really molded who they were, and I just told them early on to leave their mark, whatever they did in the classroom or outside. And I really think the Morristown Beard experience is not just academic, but in the arts, in athletics, different clubs, whatever they service, whatever they find.
Along those lines, was there anything in their MBS academic experience or extracurricular experience that informed their college major or their college choice?
Actually, definitely. Some of the classes, starting with what I had said about the classes junior and senior year, there's some really amazing electives at this school in all the departments. One of my daughters took constitutional law this year and is thinking about pursuing a career in that she would otherwise not even be familiar with. I have a daughter who spent a lot of time in Founders Hall here and performing, and she's interested in pursuing that in school. And then one of my daughters really likes science and is going the medical route. So anything they were exposed to, they were then able to build on. And by senior year, there's a lot of great electives where you can just even go further down a path, like anatomy and physiology and organic chemistry, crazy, crazy, wonderful options for the students.
My comment was, and I've shared this with the ladies before, that everything about MBS informed their college decision. It set the standard. So the kids wanted reasonable sized classes. They wanted a beautiful campus. They wanted a university that was well funded so they could pursue exactly what they were interested in. And it was a really interesting perspective for the kids to set out assessing schools based on those criteria. I think that's...
You both commented a little bit earlier, in terms of the balance, and a lot of the conversations that we're having in our office right now, and what I think you're probably having at home, is around this scheduling process, and trying to determine how much is too much in terms of rigor, what. The age-old question that we get, is it better to get the B in the AP class or the A in the standard class? Is there anything that you would say now that, your kids are near done, just in terms of, managing some of really the anxiety that's associated with choosing those courses, particularly when there are so many choices, as you said, Kelly, in terms of elective senior year?
The only thing I wanted to mention here was to not pick just because of rigor. My daughter ended up with a class that was really rigorous, but it had nothing to do with her journey, like where she had already sort of focused in on business and real estate, and it was this amazing physics class, which taught her a lot, and we had a great time, talking about quantum realities, but having said that, she did find herself like, why am I in this? So I would caution against that. and just sort of cherry pick according to what's really going to be supportive of the specific interests.
Do you think rigor is important building on it? That is a recurring theme that I did hear on campuses. Rigor is something that the colleges do look at, but you can build on it. So if a student, for example, came in as a freshman and didn't take any honors classes, that's just their starting point, that's their foundation. And then sophomore year, maybe they add a honors class or two, and then they add a third one junior year, or an AP or an AS. There's lots of different paths that you can take, but definitely where your starting point is and building from there. So if you have 4 honors classes your freshman year, it's hard because you're gonna have to maintain that for 3 years. So there is wiggle room in building up and growing. And I think that the colleges really, from our experience, really appreciate that they have time. You know, when you're 14 and 15, you don't know what you're doing or what you want to do, and there's an appreciation for that. Also, one bad grade is not the end of the world either, although every kid thinks that it is. And I think that a kid should be given a little bit of grace to get where they need to go. There's not any decision, it's just the absolute worst.
Lauren talked a lot about the personal components of the application in terms of their extracurricular activities and what did they do over the summer. Could you speak a little bit in terms of how your kids chose what they wound up, kind of committing to in terms of their interests? We get, a lot of questions in our office around, well, what would look good for me to do this summer? And that's one of our least favorite questions, because we really want students to engage in what's important to them. And believe it or not, college admission officers are very good at seeing what is genuine and what is, kind of padding a resume. So maybe you could talk a little bit about how they spent their summers, or how they chose, what they wanted to commit that time, that little bit of time that they have outside of school. And
Okay. Let's see. My daughter was involved with a couple of clubs. She was the business finance leader and GLOW. She played a couple sports here. And as far as community service, she did some tutoring that she really enjoyed. And then as a result of doing community service, she started, we live near the Great Swamp, and she started working there, and now she's the head bird watcher. It's a family joke, but the point is she really loves it, and she's still doing it, and she's way past her hours, but it's not about the hours anymore. It's really about the birds. And for Zach was in jazz band here for 7 years, and I mentioned his love of cars, and so for his community service, he tried to put together like a race fundraising event, and then he also did some repairs on a car for his friend and put that in as community service. So really the kids were really led by their interests throughout the time here at MBS, and they were encouraged to do that.
I think leading by interest is the key, and it's exactly what Noreen said. They're going to see right through it if they don't, and it's going to be tedious if they have to get through something. One of our driving forces to come to Morristown Beard was the arts program, and it definitely didn't disappoint from any art that the students take, digital, foundation, or performing arts. They have really great opportunities to grow, and that led to the love that they're all involved in, their chorus, bands, theater, all of it. Equally, they tried out for sports and just kept going with that for 4 years. But anything that they didn't like, we didn't just stick to finish a college application. I think colleges really would see through that. And the volunteer really is a great opportunity to find different things. My daughter volunteered at the first aid squad, and that led to she's going to nursing school next year because she loved it so much. But if she didn't and she had stopped, then we would have also learned that that wasn't the right fit for her. So trying different things. As for the summer, my family, they all got jobs in the summer. They literally worked and made money to have money for school during the year and pay for gas and go out with their friends. So absolutely do not underestimate the importance of a job. You have to have a commitment. The colleges see that. They have to get up at a certain time. They have to fulfill job requirements. You definitely don't have to be taking extra summer classes. You have certainly lots of opportunities here. So don't underestimate a summer job.
Families here are a little bit of ways away from actually beginning the college process. But could you comment a little bit on how you eased in once it did get underway?
Say that question again.
How did you ease into the college process once it got underway?
Do you want me to start?
Yes.
Okay, because I can take this one. So freshman year, I think it's important to not spend 4 years of high school thinking about college, because there's so many wonderful memories to make here, and you don't want to look back senior year and say, I was spending all this time trying to get into college. Freshman year, I loved the list they put up, and we referred to that early on. I checked it out early freshman year, and when it had nothing on the to-do list, I was super excited. So freshman year was developing relationships, making connections with their classmates, their teachers. Morristown Beard is great because they advocate for themselves. That's one of the skills why we all sent them here, to talk to their teachers and be in small classes. So that was freshman year. We did start a little bit sophomore year because we had 3 that we had to get through the process. So even if you wait till junior year, I think that's perfectly fine, but we just started exactly how you had said. If we were going out, we'd stop by a college campus. Do you like big? Do you like small? Just getting them a feel of what they like so that they could develop the path that they wanted to go on. So working it into a vacation so that it doesn't feel pressure, and just trying to get them to lead on what they think they want sophomore and definitely by junior year if you hadn't started yet.
Okay, that question threw me. I'm still easing. There's nothing easy about this August coming. So, we had big plans for junior year, but life was different, and we lost both our moms that particular year. So it was chaos, back and forth to hospitals, etc. So. The sooner the better, I do think. I think just to that, just the general notes, because what I realized, I was so anxious about this, but what I realized is once you paint the broad strokes, my son was city, my daughter was country. They both wanted to be reasonable distance, like fairly close to home, which is what I want to do. And they wanted a mid-size 7,000, 8,000. So once you have sort of those parameters, and then you have your GPA and your scores, there's only so many schools, so it got to be sort of less scary, it wasn't Stanford, you know what I mean? Like, that wasn't the goal anymore. So, and so that sort of develops on its own and directs you more fully into the flow of the process. If that makes any sense.
And then finally, once you were really underway, you're in the throes of the process, and we know that there can be, some ups and downs and a little bit of anxiety. What strategies did you all use to keep that pressure in check and even make it fun at times? We like to think it's fun in the College Counseling Office.
I seriously sent them to Noreen when I was getting nervous and stressing them out, so I go see Miss Cassidy. So I'm going to say I really actually enjoyed looking at the colleges with the girls because I got to see what they wanted. It was hard, but probably one of the things I'm most proud of is I let them choose their 3 sets of schools. I really strongly do not want a phone call in October that you made me go here, Mom. So I tried to really let them authentically decide what kind of school they want to go to, what they want to study, city, and we actually have 3 different sets of schools that we're ending up at. The girls are ending up at different schools. So I enjoyed the college trips. It was nice to see what they were looking for, and I let them take the lead. It's very easy to get on a campus like University of Richmond and say, oh, it's so beautiful, and look at the school, don't you want to go here? You know, if they do, they'll tell you, and if they don't, that's not liking a school is just as important because it starts to narrow down what you do and don't like. So, yeah, I think have fun on the tours and see what you all like. It's totally natural to say, wait, I can see myself as a mom here. But letting them take the lead. And I have to tell you, just working up to November 1st is just stressful as you're trying to get the deadlines in. So try and get them to sleep and eat. But there are pressure points, and that's going to be the case. So, and send them to Noreen.
One thing I did was I let them off the hook for chores. They still had their laundry, but everything else I would like let it slide. So we just had to sort of prioritize. We had a couple of slogans like "Hustle trumps colleges," and "You don't win at which college you go to." You know,
It's true.
The college tours, I tried to remember, like, this is family time, and to not add to the stress of it. My daughter was stressed out around tours, particularly, I think, but my son was pretty easygoing. And we decided for ourselves that if it wasn't a match, we would leave pretty quickly. We found that we knew pretty quickly once we stepped on the campus. And I would also say that some of the self-guided tours were just as, if not more, effective. And if I had to do it again, I would do the self-guided tours, and whenever they had like specific programs, I would go to those programs because you get a little more in-depth look at the school that way.
That's actually such a great idea. The self-guided allows you to do it yourself, but very importantly, make sure you register for them at the schools so that they know that you're on campus, because something we learned in the process is that the schools are taking note at how interested you are in the schools, so registering to get on campus. So if you're doing your self-tour, still register. You want them to know that you're there. If you go to a football game, you know, let them know that you're there, because that really does show interest. And some of these schools really take notice of that. They want students that are interested in them, and vice versa.
Right. Great, thank you so much. At this point, we'd like to open it up to any questions that you have, either for Lauren and myself or for Kelly and Angie, anything that we didn't cover or you're curious about. Yeah. We don't have any yet.
We're going to Lauren on this.
Oh, okay. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, is it still on? Can you hear me okay? Sorry. I was worried I turned it off for a second. So yeah, it's a good question. And what's tough is depending on the sport, the level, you know, it may sort of start at different times. I would say for whatever particular sport your student is thinking about playing, just a quick dive into, you know, the timeline, and certainly we're happy to be resources for that as well. But typically, you know, beginning, again, depending on the sport and the level, you know, it could be beginning in sophomore or junior year. That's when they're going to be having some contact with a coach. But what's nice is that all 4 of us in the office have had, you know, plenty of students over the years who have gone through the athletic recruiting process, so we can sort of, like I said, speak to that and help you get started with it. But yes, for some students it may accelerate the timeline a little bit. It's not uncommon for, you know, a student who's a junior to already be wrapped up, although for many of them it's into the summer between junior and senior year. But that would be one of the I mean, I would say actually a lot of this advice is still applicable. So trying to figure out, what types of schools are going to be the right fit for the student, and having athletics play a part of it. We hear all the time students who go to college and then will, for one reason or another, stop playing. So we want to make sure that they're in love with the college for, academically, socially, and athletically. So those would be sort of a couple pointers. I don't know, Noreen, if you might want to add.
Yeah, I mean, I think the athletic process is also driven somewhat by, what students are doing both here and outside of school, and how they spend their summer. So a lot of that will come about as a result of, camps and tournaments and so forth that they're doing during the summer. As Lauren mentioned, it's going to vary, greatly in terms of division. So, we have had Division I athletes who are, quote, committed by the end of junior year, but that's a verbal commitment. And so, we try to be a little careful about that too. Division III, can happen a little bit later, and typically that commitment manifests as usually an early decision application, a binding early decision application for Division III. But that's certainly something that we can help with, and also, we're working with our coaches in that process for some guidance as well. Yes. So I realized I threw around some terms that people may or may not be familiar with. Early action is a non-binding application program. So typically students apply by November 1st, and they receive a decision either by mid-December or early January. If they're admitted as an early action candidate, they can still keep all of their other applications active. If a student applies through early decision, they're committing to that college that if they're admitted, and again, it's the same time frame, that they will attend. And so there's a contract that students, parents, and we as counselors sign, indicating that we understand that if you're admitted early decision, you'll withdraw all of your other applications. Clearly, if you're going to do that, a school really has to rise to the top in terms of being your first choice, because if you get in, you're foregoing all of your other options. In recent years, for better or worse, there are a lot of colleges that are admitting up to half of their freshman class through early decision. So the acceptance rate can be higher at early decision. It can be a benefit to apply early decision. So that's all part of the conversation that we're having as we're developing a list and students are prioritizing their choices. Yeah.
When does that conversation take place through the year? If the deadlines are November 1st, when do you start reaching out to the students, or students reach out to the office? Is that in September, as soon as school starts?
Yeah, I mean, those conversations are really ongoing. So, for instance, with juniors who we've been meeting with so far, we know a lot of them are going to be visiting schools over spring break. And, our expectation is that they will circle back to us after spring break and, let us know what they think. I loved such and such, I didn't like this. It's helpful for us to know how students are reacting to different colleges, because it can help us to come up with further suggestions. And so that conversation, just as it's ongoing in your own households, it's ongoing in our offices too. When throughout the summer and when we come back in September, that's when we're really, sort of honing in on what the final list is going to be. And much of our job at that point is to make sure that that balance is there. So, it's okay to have one or two, what we would refer to as reasonable reaches. We want students to have one or two likely or safety schools. And then most should fall somewhere in the middle, where they might have a 50 50 or better chance of getting in. With early decision being so prevalent, though, there's a lot of conversations that we might have where, a school might be a low reach, but if you apply early decision, it would fall sort of into a target range. So again, until the list is finalized, these are ongoing conversations that we're having. Yes. Yeah, very much so. So we are, we're a very collaborative office. We are constantly in and out of each other's offices, as throughout the day, but there's certain points in the process where we come together and, work as a group on every single student. So, when we're looking at that balance and we're making sure that students are going to have, the appropriate options when this is all over, we're literally going through every single list, the four of us.
As a
And,
parent,
and sometimes it's a matter of, here I'm working with so-and-so, they're looking for this, that, and the other thing. Here's what I've suggested so far, what am I missing? So we, even in this preliminary stage, we're bouncing things off one another.
as a parent, that was one of the first things that really came through. I definitely felt like the college counseling was collaborative, and I recall one time where Ms. Cassidy and I were having a discussion about submitting test scores or not, and the first thing she said, because we were struggling on whether to do that or not, and she said, I'm going to bring it to my colleagues and we're going to discuss it, and that was a huge relief to have a collaborative, what should we do in this decision, and that really has always come through their cohesiveness and just their general liking and respect for each other is one of the things that's really noticeable in the college counseling department.
Maybe one or two more? Yeah.
So we are also parents of multiples, so we go with the same situation. So my question with that is twofold. One is, as a family, were you open and honest about each other's lists and targets and where they might be doing, different schools? Did you do it kind of as a family? Did you go all separately and try to tackle different things? And then the second would be, not only in your home, but did you find that it was more or less stressful for your students to share with their peers what they were doing? Or is it something that they should kind of stay in their lane and let's not focus about these other places or these other schools? I find that sometimes peers can be very helpful and sometimes peers can be really very concerned in certain aspects of this whole process.
We don't know how to be any other way but honest, and usually mocking and making fun and having a lot of laughs. And that's what we did. I mean, the kid, my son, they're different academically. They're different. They're just so different. I'm sure yours are too. I don't know. So my son, you remember, I'm a little bit rock and roll and I'm a little bit country. That's who my kids are. They're completely different. And so I think there was maybe one school that overlapped that we saw early on, and neither one of them liked it. And from then on, it was separate tours, and and we just had to plan accordingly. He was ACT, she was SAT. There's very different. He did a lot of honors. She did AP, and she was more high strung. He would get a score and be like, I want that to be a little higher, and that's it. And then he would just go and get it higher. It was amazing, very, very chill. That's my son, and they knew each other's academic standing, and they just were supportive. And I'm pretty sure that was the same situation with their peers. I never, for prom, they all post, this is what I'm wearing, you know? It's a unique thing about the school. I really never got a sense that there was, you know, oh, don't look at my list, or, you know, if anything, they maybe pushed each other a little more, but I really did get a sense of support. And I'm sensitive to that, so I think I can say honestly that it was a good experience.
So I have the same sex. I have 3 girls, so that makes it a little bit different than boy-girl. We absolutely shared lists. We discussed it, and divide and conquer. If you have 2 boys that like the same schools, it would be crazy to go there twice. You only have so much time. I had one that had a very different list. The nursing was very specific. So she would say, oh, they don't have a nursing program, and she'd take herself out. But if there were times that I took all 3 to the same school, very supportive. I would think it would be hard to keep the list quiet. And also, then I think it would put more pressure on it, like you have to get into this school. You want it to be a positive experience. As for peers, I cannot emphasize how special Morristown Beard is. There's a decision page on Instagram, if any of you want to go look at it, and the kids post when they get into their schools, and their classmates completely cheer them on. They're really, really happy for whatever school they get into. Wherever it ranks, you know, there's a girl on there that is going to UPenn next year, and the whole class is thrilled for her, and anywhere underneath that. So I know people at different schools, competitive schools of ours, Newark Academy, Pingree, Kent Place. They do not share lists. They do not talk about it. It's stressed the entire school year, and I just didn't find that. One of the first schools that came in was Providence, and 4 kids ED'd and 4 kids got in, and this class went crazy. They were so happy for their classmates because we were living it, and it's a really special place. It doesn't feel uber competitive. I mean, the reality is that some schools are going to be competitive, but overall, I really think it's a special place in that people are genuinely happy for their classmates, and it makes us very unique. But please, if you have schools where your both sons want to go to, don't go there twice.
Do you want to add anything to that, or no?
No, I was just going to highlight exactly what Kelly said, and just in terms of the support of the students, and yeah, like you said, when the decisions come out, how happy they are for each other. I was walking through the student center, and a student just across the room shouted one of his college acceptances, because why would you come up to actually tell me that in person? You just shout it out when you happen to see me. And everyone in the room was so excited, and then oh, is that where you're going to go? And I was trying to be okay. Let's give them some breathing room. But no, it is very much a supportive group of students, and they're open without being braggy, which I think is a nice thing. So hopefully, make sure your students keep that momentum going when they're seniors.
I think they also respect too when students choose to keep it to themselves, because a lot of students do. Not everybody is broadcasting where they're applying, and we don't recommend that they do. There's certainly different points in the process where we remind them, to be sensitive to, what's going on around them. And again, I think that's one of the special parts of Morristown Baird is that they are. So there's a nice balance between celebrating one another, but also being sensitive to the fact that not everybody's getting the same news at the same time. We are closing, we're actually just beyond 7:30, so maybe one more question yeah. CLFO? Yeah. Ninth grade, yeah.
Yes, I'm trying to remember the status actually, so that's a good question. I know that sophomores definitely have access to it, and parents and guardians of sophomores would have gotten an access email. I'm not quite sure of the status of ninth graders.
grade,
I'd have
yeah.
to check. Typically by the end of ninth grade year, we do open that up. I think that's when we started.
Yeah, I think we did it last year going into the summer after ninth grade.
It's called CIALFO. Great question. Yeah, so if you are parents or guardians of sophomores and you haven't received an email with something called CIALFO, CIALFO, email one of the 2 of us so we can make sure you have access. But yeah, I believe we typically onboard at the end of ninth grade year, so that over the summer, if that's a helpful resource, we can get you set up with that.
It's a platform whereby it serves a number of purposes. I mean, you can explore colleges through CALFO. It's where we keep track of colleges that we're recommending for students, and with a long list of colleges that eventually becomes narrowed down to their application list. And then it's also the platform from which we submit all of our school materials when students actually apply. The data that's in there, a lot of it, I mean, you can search on colleges and you can link to college websites and find a lot of general information about any college. But then there's also Morristown Baird specific information too. So you can kind of see a very general profile of, Morristown Baird students who apply to particular schools over, a 5-year history. So, okay. And yeah, one more. I know you had your hand up before.
I wonder, immediately after COVID, we heard anecdotally from a lot of parents and their students that college admissions have become extremely unpredictable. I'm just wondering what trends you all are seeing in that regard now. Have they become more predictable again? So it's kind of surprising to hear you say that on average kids are doing 7 or 8 applications. Because I've heard from some family parents it's 15, and I'm wondering if that's because it's become more predictable or it's because early decision and early admission are so much more prevalent.
Yeah. There were a couple things that happened after COVID. One was that everybody was forced to go test optional. So, because testing just wasn't available during that time. Once testing was available, colleges remain test optional for the most part, but there are some that are starting to go back, but certainly not in big numbers. What that did at the more selective levels is it increased the size of the applicant pools, because students who would have self-selected out because of their test scores were applying. And so colleges were experiencing big increases in their applicant pools. And then once testing started to become available again, only the strong test takers were submitting. And so it was driving up the average test scores at those places. And so it did become more competitive because of the size of the applicant pools, and it certainly did become a little bit more unpredictable, for us to be able to look back at previous profiles of Morristown Baird students and with a certain amount of certainty, be able to predict what was going to happen, even though we can never be absolutely sure. If we could, we'd all sleep much better at night. But I think it is starting to level out a little bit. It's still very competitive. I mean, the landscape at those more selective levels is very tough, but I think it is leveling out a little bit, just in terms of having, several years of data that you can fall back on that's going to be somewhat consistent. Lauren, would you?
But to your point, I think the early decision and early action conversation is also something that keeps our
Yeah.
numbers more reasonable, and that, if we have a student who, has a couple, maybe a smart early decision option, a couple of early actions, they may decide to just submit those and then wait to hear back from their school in December, and then that list that was 7 or 8 schools might drop down to 2 or 3. There are some students that will have application counts in the double digits, and depending on, it might be a certain program. I have a student who's applying to dance, and so she had to cast a very wide net. So we see some of that, but for the most part, we're encouraging them to really keep that balance, because it's also a matter of how many extra essays they're going to write, how many campuses they might have a chance to visit, if they're doing interviews. It becomes very all-consuming if they apply to more than that number. So while we certainly don't, limit them in any way, we have found that if they're conducting a thoughtful search, usually that 7 to 8 number is plenty to have, again, a couple likelies, a couple reaches, and then most schools in that target. Even as things become more unpredictable, we at least have some good data to back that up, our guesses, and make sure that they are going to have some good outcomes. I mean, I mean, knock on something, we don't want to jinx it, but every year students have, options from which to choose by the time they're graduating, so, or by April.
We tend to function on, a list of 10, really. I mean, I think if you conduct a thoughtful search, you shouldn't have to apply to any more than 10 schools. And, for those kids who get, up in the 15 to 20 range, they will come back when all is said and done and say, I made it so much harder on myself, not only in terms of the amount of work that it takes, but in some cases they wind up with more options than they can really consider, and it makes it that much harder, this time of year. So, and I think that the last slide had us at like a 58% acceptance rate overall, which that's somewhere where we usually wind up, somewhere between like 58 to 65% overall acceptance rate for a given class. So, well, I want to thank Kelly and Angie for joining us tonight. I also want to thank you all for coming out during what I know is a busy week leading up to spring break. Enjoy the nice weather, enjoy maybe some family time over the next couple weeks. Please know that we are here as a resource, even though we're not individually working with you quite yet. You can always reach out to us with any questions. So thank you so much.